renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and beautify our community. Trees in our township increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. And whereas in the Township of Chesterfield, all citizens are encouraged to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. Therefore, all citizens are urged to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Charter Township of Chesterfield Board of Trustees does hereby proclaim April 27th, 2018, Arbor Day.
I'll take that as a motion to adopt the proclamation as stated. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Clerk Barry, support by Trustee Anderson, to adopt the proclamation declaring Arbor Day as April 27th, 2018. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion is adopted. 7B, approval to adopt a proclamation declaring National Volunteer Week as April 15th, 2018 through April 21st, 2018. Clerk Barry.
Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to make a motion to approve to adopt the proclamation as I will read it. National Volunteer Week Proclamation. A regular board meeting of the Township Board of Charter Township of Chesterfield, County of Macomb, Michigan, held on April 16, 2018 at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the Township offices located at 47275 Sugar Bush Road, Chesterfield, Michigan. Whereas the entire community can inspire, equip, and mobilize people to take action that changes our township, and volunteers can connect with our local community service opportunities such as the Beautification Commission, Historical Society, Parks and Recreation, Friends of Chesterfield Police, and senior programs. And whereas individuals and committees are at the center of social change, discovering their power to make a difference during this week all over the nation, service projects will be performed and volunteers recognized for the commitment to service. And whereas the giving of oneself in service to another empowers the giver, and the recipient and experience teaches us that government by itself cannot solve all of our nation's problems. And whereas our county's volunteer force of over 63 million is a great treasure, and volunteers are vital to our future as a caring and productive nation and in our community. And whereas our fellow citizens are encouraged to volunteer in our community or with one of the aforementioned committees or groups, by volunteering and recognizing those who serve, we can replace disconnection with understanding and compassion. And now therefore be it resolved that the Charter Township of Chesterfield Board of Trustees does hereby proclaim April 15th through 21st, 2018 National Volunteer Week.
Motion by Clerk Barry.
Support.
Support by Trustee Demink to approval to adapt a proclamation declaring National Volunteer Week as April 15th, 2018 through April 21st, 2018 as read by Clerk Barry. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion prevails. Item 8 is the regular agenda. 8A, approve a request by the Public Safety Department to purchase 20 ballistic safety kits from General Ledger number 205301-740 for a cost of $18,100. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Anderson.
Support.
Support by Trustee Demink. Dr. Kirsten.
The memo that I provided to you is pretty self-explanatory. What I'm looking to do is enhance the protective capabilities of the law enforcement officers, including the firefighters that may respond to a potential active shooter situation. The type of equipment that we're purchasing here is a higher level ballistic material, both helmets and vests, to enter into a tactical environment where gunfire is unfortunately being used or presented to the officers.
Questions on the board?
Director Kirsten, I see we had 3 bids, and this was the lowest bid from
Yes.
on duty here.
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Trustee Vosberg.
Thank you. How is that, I support this, by the way, but how is that stored? And where do they keep it, and how does it become available?
It's stored in the police vehicles. They're universal helmets, universal vests, and plates. We have other tactical equipment that we carry, backpacks, first aid kits. And this will just be a component that they put on if they enter into that environment.
So one more tool in the,
Yes.
in the toolkit trunk, yes.
That's
Okay,
correct.
Thank you.
Hopefully, this never occurs.
Motion by trustee Anderson, support by trustee Demink to approve the request by the Public Safety Department to purchase 20 ballistic safety kits from General Ledger 205301-740 for a cost of $18,100. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Akavetti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Motion prevails. Thank you, Director Kirsten.
Thank you.
8B, approve a request by the Supervisor's Office to authorize the Township Supervisor to submit a letter of interest to the Michigan Air National Guard Base, Selfridge, to further explore the Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Grant Process, known as REPI. I'll make a motion to approve as stated.
Support?
Motion by Supervisor Akavetti, support by Clerk Berry. Discussion. And we do still have representatives from the Air Force Base here if members have any additional questions. Motion by Supervisor Akavetti, support by Clerk Berry to approve the request by the Supervisor's Office to authorize the Township Supervisor to submit the attached letter of interest to the Michigan Air National Guard Base to further explore the REPI grant process. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Supervisor Akavetti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Motion prevailed. 8C, approve a request by the Public Safety Department to upgrade and refurbish the Fire Department's 1997 Stupin 100-foot aerial truck number 3 for a cost not to exceed $100,000 from General Ledger number 205-340-986.000. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Anderson,
Second?
support by Clerk Berry. Director Kirsten.
I've provided you a pretty detailed package of photographs. This truck has been a reliable piece of equipment in the fire department for some time, since 1997. This is the first major overhaul refurbishment that it's going to experience. We reached out to a couple of different vendors to come in and give us a quote to refurb it and modernize it, update it. I think it's a reasonable cost compared to what a new vehicle to replace it would be. You're in excess of $1 million for that type of equipment. There is a contingency amount that's attached to this should they discover anything during the refurbishment. I think we can stay below that. And if this is approved, this truck's life will be extended into the future for years to come.
Director Kirsten, just real quick, how many miles are on that truck?
A little over 4,000.
So in other words, it doesn't go out.
That's correct.
It goes out when it's needed.
When it's needed, and a necessary piece of equipment.
Or if we're assisting another fire department within
Correct.
these areas. All right, thanks, sir.
Any further questions from the board? Motion by Trustee Anderson, support by Clerk Berry to approve the request by the Public Safety Department to upgrade and refurbish the fire department's 1997 100-foot aerial truck number 3 for a cost not to exceed $100,000 from General Ledger number 205-340-986. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Akavetti.
Aye.
Thank you again.
Item 8D, approve a request by the Supervisor's Office to approve a revised procurement and purchasing policy for the Charter Township of Chesterfield. I'll make a motion to approve as stated.
Second?
Motion by Supervisor Akavetti, support by Clerk Berry.
Mr. Akavetti?
I'm going to start with a comment on this one myself to begin with.
Mr. Akavetti?
Yes, Trustee Anderson.
Mr. Joseph had been here today except for the death of his mother-in-law earlier today. I would ask the board to entertain a motion to postpone this item until the May 7th meeting.
Motion to postpone this item to the May 7th meeting. Is there support? Support. Motion by Trustee Anderson, support by Treasurer LaFata to postpone to the May 7th meeting. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Nay.
Trustee Vosberg.
No.
Supervisor Akavetti.
No.
Clerk Berry, no.
We're back to the motion to approve a request by the Supervisor's Office to approve a revised procurement policy for the Charter Township of Chesterfield. Board of Trustees, I present the attached April 16th, 2018 Board Consideration Amendment to the Charter Township of Chesterfield's Purchasing Policy and Procedures. It is my belief that the changes presented tonight constitute the first step in updating our purchasing and procurement policy. The problem that this amendment is attempting to solve is as follows. The Charter Township of Chesterfield has and continues to utilize multiple professional service vendors without analyzing or assessing those vendor contracts that they operate under. Many of our professional service vendors operate under agreements that are over 20 years old, lack detailed scope, expectations, fee schedules, and are open-ended. My goal with the adoption of this amendment is as follows. The Charter Township of Chesterfield has a best practice policy to select and hire professional service vendors. All professional service consultants have executed legal agreements that outline detailed scopes of service, expectations, fee schedules, timeline, and duration. Madam Clerk, I represent that my comments be printed as part of the record pursuant to Section 7.3 of our Board Rules and Procedures. A copy of my previous comments will be provided to the clerk's office. My next comments will be a general overview. The primary piece that this amendment is looking to address is how we procure professional service consultants. As laid out in the attachment that I sent to the board, and we have been working on and off here. I've been working on it constantly for at least a year, and with much input from some members of the board for that last year, is laid out in the executive summary that's located in the packet. Some pretty simple things like the introduction of a cover page to our purchasing policy, an introduction of what the policy is intended to do, guiding principles and goals of what our purchasing policy should guide us toward. D is prior board authorizations. That is the section that deals with professional service consultants. Two major attachments to this amendment are a qualifications-based selection detailed process, along with a heavy civil construction procurement process policy. That is a direct result of our year's worth of discussions on construction projects, civil engineering projects, and how they are being handled by the township and this board. I also added a paragraph on unlawful expenditures to make our purchasing policy clear as to what the township can and cannot spend its resources on. And lastly, I added a conflict of interest paragraph that I believe every best service procurement process should have. It's been several decades since our purchasing policy has had a complete rewrite and overhaul, and that does not constitute best practice for any municipality. I don't think this is the end solution. I believe this is the first step to get us to an entire purchasing policy. There are other items in here with participation of the board, payment routing, purchase authorization routing, purchase thresholds that will need to be looked at. This amendment does not address that. I look forward to the discussion. This has been a long time coming, and I will open it up to the board for comments. Treasurer LaFauda.
Thank you. I think I'll get up to address the board on this.
Treasurer LaFato, just make sure you use the microphone so that we can hear your comments.
This is a summary of company. It might be difficult to follow. Sorry. Whoa.
We got her under control.
Jumping everything. The first thing is I sent Supervisor Acrobatic back, I handed him a draft back in December of 2016. It basically was totally ignored for months. Basically,
Knocking me down.
totally ignored for months. In here, there's a lot of add-ons that Supervisor Acrobatic's been adding in the months of dedication to this state. If you,
Treasurer LaFato, please use the microphone so that we can.
the manual was a guide, took into consideration. This is the only institution I've ever worked in or at that doesn't approve purchases prior to making the purchase. They approve all the purchases after the fact. Even our auditors, Plant and Rand, when I talked to them, said that's a very bad policy. That's a very bad thing not to have a process and a procedure for it. Going through many iterations of trying to figure out a media and at the same time trying to be frugal with the township's money. Originally I looked for a shared drive system that we could do economically. Then, since everybody else spends money on software packages, we have iCompass, we have new software for the new website. So I figure maybe we should just go out and spend the money and go to BS&A. It's in the package. Along with this package, there was a flow chart and some of the issues that is caused by the current policy in not having purchase requisitions approved prior to issuing a purchase order. We get late fees, we get shut off by customers, we purchase things for more than we should because we don't have qualified vendors or payment terms. It's all in here. It's very old, over 2 years old. Never got any attention. It has all.
Paul, just address us if you can.
Oh, that's fine. It has the clauses in there that there should be no conflict of interest, that everything, like I said, 2 years ago. This tried to address everything in the township for purchasing, not just contractual engineering or heavy services. I have you have to excuse me, my sinuses aren't all that good.
I believe you've earned a little bit of leeway during your comments, Treasurer LaFato.
What I just handed out is purchases that have recently gone astray. We've got a new cell phone contract that was supposed to be a reduction in cost. Last 2 months' billings have almost been double of the old. The first time the billing came to me for authorization to pay, I was told we had credits and adjustments that were going to take care of it. A whole nother month went by, and we're still $2,500 more than our last contracts. Nothing, in a month, nothing happened, no reconciliation, and the person that should be responsible for this isn't tasked, isn't held responsible, and I don't understand it. That's the other thing. When you purchase something, the person that authorizes it or commits to the project should be responsible for it, both in timing, financially, and the quality of it. The other thing is the printers that were taken off the agenda item. The RICO quote says that the township is paying $93,000, $93,876 for purchasing. That was leases, paper, and everything. When I went into the finance department, because I signed all the invoices for the printers and the ink and the paper, it was $41,000.
Treasurer Lafata, try to give your comments to the board.
It was $41,000, less than half of the proposal. I took this to Supervisor Accavetti, and his quoted words were, maybe it would be nice to have new lease printers. It's so far out of whack financially, it's not even funny. So when I went to the person who promoted this project, it didn't go through finance because I checked. When I asked the questions that are in in the executive summary for RICO, it says that the township would save $3,324 per month. Wrong. If, in a private sector, if somebody had a cost save and you didn't have an established delta before you started the program to benchmark your actual savings and report to it as the savings came in, you get fired. But in a township like this, there's really no responsibility. There's no recourse. When I confronted Clerk Barry about this, who actually brought this agenda item to the board, which was removed after I brought her this document, she says, well, I have no idea where the information came. I'll send it to RICO. Well, it's been over 4 weeks. Nothing's come back. And if you compare data, it would have been a very bad mistake. But our purchasing policy doesn't protect us from it, but Paul Lafata did. And I'm not making any opinions, it's all facts and data. There's been other expenditures that have been the same. I could mention them. Maybe I will later.
Thank you. I'm going to afford you whatever time you need, Treasurer Lafata. I do believe you have earned it. And
I will take my time.
Okay, so you are not complete. Just whatever time you need, and stay on the topic of revising everything. Stay on the topic of revising the purchasing policy. However, I am giving you a lot of leeway for germaneness. That's all I wanted to say. You've earned the respect.
Let me explain something to you. I just want to make a statement. In your purchasing policy, you have purchasing, you have contractual engineering, and you have heavy construction. And my relevancy, each one of these documents is relative to those three things.
You may continue. Somebody's phone is ringing.
That's me. Excuse me, sorry. Okay. This is contractual engineering invoices from 2013 till current. These are all the invoices from AEW for contractual services. I think it's perfect. If you look at the summary that's in the back, it starts with 213. And what it did is I grouped them by description. We have floodplain, water main planning, sanitary planning, GSI for sanitary.
Excuse me, sir, could you pick up the mic so people in back can hear?
Deputies, general supervisor, and 212 TV and cleaning. Same thing we did with the SAW grant. So if you look at that, I took out all of the capital projects. So all we have is the everyday business. We spent $129,000 roughly. If you go down, if we go by the current policy, we would have to get approved by the board, water main planning, sanitary planning, GSI sanitary planning, Nepides planning, GSI water planning, and 212 TV cleaning. Those would all have to be approved by the board. Under the change that Supervisor Accavetti is making, there'll be no requirements for these improvements by the board. It takes away the transparency. It doesn't come to the board, and the residents don't see that we're spending the money. There's one other thing. Look at the back page. If you look at the back page summary, (2013) was a year with very little capital projects. 2014, there were capital projects. Went from 129,000 to 33,000. 2015, the same thing. Went down, went up. There was fewer capital projects. 2016, 2017, you're looking at SAW grant. Look at the numbers for the year for everything but capital projects. 16,000, 18,000. Currently this year, the first quarter, we're 8,000. My efficiency benchmark for contractual engineering would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $18,000 to $30,000. It's just data, not my opinion. It's just raw data. What you have here is a copy of the estimates 13 and 14 for the work that Deutsch did for the SAW grant. If you look at estimate number 13 was presented after Deutsch did all the physical work out in the streets. There's 2 items in here which I don't understand, and nobody, I'll get to that, but there's traffic control major streets, traffic control minor streets. There's no work being done on the streets at all. Deutsch is all done. And the estimate 13 was at 50%, or 15,000 and 11,000. If you look at estimate 14, no work being done out in the street by Deutsch. Now that they're 100%, it went to 30,000 and 22,000. I had a meeting with Lyle Wynn in my office, and I asked him about this. And I said, I don't understand it, but I really don't want to pay for something I didn't do. So I said, could I have the timesheets from Deutsch? He says, well, maybe they didn't do it. Maybe they contracted it out. I said, that's fine, give me the invoice. I didn't receive anything. I didn't get a response. If I was going to have another project done by any contractual engineer, I would take a 1-unit quote out of here and make it by the hour. There's one other thing. I don't understand why when the invoices are sent to the township for payment, they're marked estimates, especially the final one says estimate. Estimate to me is like a weasel word. It's like, well, I'm not 100% sure.
Mr. Supervisor,
Trustee
is this
Vosper.
relevant to the discussion of?
It has to do,
Because
it has to do with contract engineering.
Treasurer LaFata.
I just need a point of information, please.
Yes, there could be a question of germaneness, but I am going to allow Treasurer LaFata some latitude.
Well, okay, it would just be helpful when he's discussing this, how this fits, does or does not fit into the proposal, because I'm happy to listen to any reasons that the proposal might be a shortfall in the proposal, but I need to know what that is so I can.
It's related to the purchasing policy, and I do believe that Treasurer LaFata deserves a little bit of latitude here.
Thank you.
If I'm going to take the responsibility to sign something, and one of our contractual engineering sources can't validate that expenditure, there's an issue. It's not addressed by the purchasing policy amendment. And it's taxpayers' money, not mine. That's fine, you got it. Brian, I don't think you got the whole thing. Unfortunately, I don't have two admin. This is an overview of project management that I brought to the first meeting we had here at the township with the township, the state, and the county. The reason why I did this is the township expended $40,000 prior to the date that qualifies the township for reimbursement. It's $40,000 the township won't see. When I met with Lyle Wynn, AEW representative, I asked him for the work product that we got for the $28,000 of the $40,000 expenditure. The only thing that he could give me was the topographical, nothing else. And then he told me that this project number was used for other things other than the Weber Paddle Park. Not a good practice. You would think that our prime professional source could read the grant and understand when to do work so that the township could take advantage of the reimbursement from the MDEQ. Now, the last one, number 8, is I received recently an invoice for the Weber Paddle Park from AEW. The invoice dates are from February 5th to March 4th, 2018. Marked with various, it's attached, with various work product. None of that work product was done between those dates. It's signed by Supervisor Accavetti. I know this is painful for some people, but it's necessary. The township never does project closeouts or financial audits. What I have here was sent to me, and what it is AEW did a project for the city of Novi. The city of Novi staff and their attorney sent a letter back to AEW saying that they don't think they expended the hours that were in the billing. They asked for timesheets. Based on the actual timesheets, it reduced the cost by about $6,800. There's a letter in here from AEW signed by Gordy Wilson agreeing with that statement. Nothing in our purchasing policy for contractual engineering says we're going to audit, keep track, benchmark. What I just passed out is an estimate that somehow wound up in the SAW grant. for the northwest quadrant of the township. That was in these books here. It cost the township about $2.2 million. And the only thing that came out of here so far that was going to be used was these estimates out of the back section of the workbook. In fact, there was never a project closeout or a project presentation for the $1.2 million that we spent.
Treasurer LaFauda, could you restate that for me, please?
Pardon?
Could you restate your last point for me, please?
We spent $2.2 million on the SAW grant. And the only thing that we've brought to the attention of the residents is phase 1 of the northwest quadrant.
Thank you for restating that.
Now, there was a quote in there for $804,000. The second page is the same quote with the same, with the same date, only the numbers changed. They got higher. There's no revision date or a scope change to justify it. No reason. It makes me nervous when estimates are changed without a scope change or a revision date. This is a cutout out of a college textbook sent to me by one of the residents and a member of the Water Rate Advisory Board. It says that engineering cost control consists of assuring that the work elements are accomplished within their respective budgets because their different characteristics is useful within the respective budgets. Because they differ in characteristics, it is useful to have 3 separate budgets for each work element. Budget for direct labor, budget for support services, budget for and budget for purchase services, which would be contractual engineering services. Expenditures for support services need to be handled separately because these functions are typically provided on a time and material basis with no budgetary discipline. Support service groups will generally do whatever asked of them and will charge accordingly, making no attempt to absorb costs due to errors of estimation or performance. Moreover, their work tends to be done in large lumps, so the overage are so lumpy and come without much warning. Thus, we lose an opportunity to oversee their mistakes and deficiencies. How work is assigned to support services need to be more familiar than toxic, and it can be characterized in scope quite well if the effort is made to do so. According to program managers, they should insist on obtaining detailed budgetary estimates for work to be done to support the groups and the projects. They must be prepared with care at the beginning. All right. What we have is we pay a contractual engineer to create a budgetary estimate. But if you look at the budgetary estimates, when they come back from the quote basis, they don't always match up. They use different amounts of pipe footage, digging, whatever. And if you notice in the 13 and 14 invoices from AEW, they adjust each one of those accordingly. Our contractual engineers don't have any responsibility in this. Their estimate affects our bottom line cost for a project. Engineering services went up on the bottom. Based on the packet that Supervisor Accavetti put out, his best practices limits the quotation of contractual engineering. This is just an example of Canton Township that has a complete list of instructions, specifications, requirements for contractual engineering for a heavy project for their downtown development. Other townships like Novi, Wixom, Bloomfield Hills, Canton go out for bid for contractual engineering for their engineering services. They're not limited to one. And they don't bypass the $3,000 and $20,000 limit. Recently, we approved AEW to do a water amp. There was a requirement and a due date of January 1, 2018. Well, I guess we were late, but Bloomfield Township out on the web has an RFP out for contractual engineering to do their water amp. If other townships can do it, if other townships can restrain and control the dollar limits of approval so it's transparent, I don't understand why Chesterfield Township can't. You take away the transparency because it doesn't come to the board. The residents don't know that the money's being spent. It takes away the competitiveness. And basically, we've been locked in to the same contractual engineer for all the way back to 1996. I'll rest my case. These are all facts and all data. If anybody wants a copy of it, come to my office. I'll give it to you.
Thank you, Treasurer LaFleur. Normally, the normal procedure would be for me to allow every member on the board to speak.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
The normal procedure would be for me to allow, you can come back over here if you want, Treasurer LaFleur, to allow every member on the board to speak before someone speaks twice. The only exception to that rule is when an individual's name is called. So both myself and Clerk Barry were called, so I'm going to speak again if I can.
Are you talking about like board procedures to put this on the agenda?
No, I'm not. I'm just talking about the procedures right now. And take your seat back over here, Treasurer LaFleur. We're going to continue the meeting.
Well, I really, there is no time limit, and I hate when you keep saying take your seat.
Would you like to speak again? Or I thought you were done with your comments. You can speak all night. We have till 10:30 without.
You made a comment. I didn't fully understand it.
The comment was, in order for members of this board to understand why I'm going to speak again before calling them to speak,
Okay.
it's because my name was called. That's all that was. It was a courtesy to the rest of the board. So that is why I'm going to speak again. Normally, I would allow the conversation to go around here. I had 13 significant items that I wanted to discuss there, and I'm not going to go through every one of them, but I do want to touch on.
Excuse me, did you ask anybody else? You already had comments. Did you ask anybody else on the board if they had comments?
Treasurer LaFata, I just explained before I began, if you've watched every meeting I've ran over the last 18 months, I allow everybody to speak. Unless if they're called out, then they are able to speak right now. So myself was called out, and so was Clerk Barry. So I'm going to afford myself to respond to some of the issues that you brought up. I'd like to start by saying I appreciate your passion, your work ethic, and all the effort you've put in on compiling all of this data. But it does highlight the reason why we are here, and it highlights it very, very well. So we've had conversations on these issues throughout, with the entire board. I've had these conversations over the last year, and they seem to just be coming back up over and over again. So I'm going to take some time and go through a couple of the items. The first one is, and it'll be 2 items. This document, it is labeled or titled Construction Pay Estimate Number 14. So there are 2 questions related to this document that was handed out. One was why it's called an estimate, and the other was related to traffic control. These are construction estimates. That is just what the construction process calls them. That is what the heavy civil procurement process calls them. Another word for this document could be pay estimate. So it's an easy fix. Well, it even does say pay estimate there.
Why does it say
Pay
estimate?
estimate. Well, I'll explain that once I get to the unit price contract. So once we get done going through the civil engineering portion of this discussion, which I do feel like we have to have, and I'm sorry if it's painful, because I've had this conversation over and over again. These are the traffic control items that were brought up. So once we go through this purchasing policy procedure, which we will, you will see that everything ends in a contract. So when it comes to construction contracting, and we're not even discussing the contract with our professional service consultant, which I will get to in a minute. But that project, you will have a contract. In this instance, that contract is with Deutsch Brothers. That contract is signed by the township, and it is a unit price contract. Items are laid out in very, very great detail in the Michigan Department of Transportation spec book and the actual bid proposal prepared by our professional engineer. That contract trumps the purchasing policy. That contract is unit price for a reason. It's the same reason why every mile, every foot of Michigan Department of Transportation roadway, every foot of sewer, every foot of water main, every heavy civil infrastructure project in the entire state or country is built under a unit price contract. And the reason why it's built under that is to protect the owner. If you're going to pave a road or put in water main, you only pay for what you put in. So specifically related to the traffic control item, this entity signed a contract, a unit price contract with Deutsch Brothers. There are estimated quantities on there, and the reason why they're estimated is because there are other factors at play, other state laws and federal laws at play when it comes to underground construction. There's something called a differing site condition clause. There are multiple reasons why we procure civil engineering services using the unit contract. So the traffic control items specifically are bid. So you get a unit price contract and you get you open the bids. The low bid generally gets the project, and they have unit prices associated with that bid. So the specific traffic control item says, in order to protect the owner, when the contractor mobilizes to the site, he gets 5% of that number. When the project is 50% complete, he gets more percent of that number. When the project is 75% complete, he gets more. The very last piece of that is held until you get final completion, which is not to be confused with substantial completion. Two totally different things in civil engineering. So the reason why that money is held and the estimate of 50% was paid at the very end was to protect us as the owner. This just highlights why we're here. For the last year, I've had these conversations about why it's called an estimate, why it is a unit price contract, and why are we paying traffic control? Well, there are books and books that determine how those items are paid, and they're all there to protect the township or the owner, even if it's a private owner, whoever's investing in heavy civil infrastructure projects. That covers at least three of them that I wanted to touch on. The traffic control item, estimate 14, and the unit price contract. Another one I want to speak about is the Charter Township of Chesterfield Downtown Development Authority. This is a request for proposals or request for qualifications to procure a professional service contract for the DDA of Canton Township. It is exactly the same thing that I am looking to put in place here. Exactly. They are not looking to procure a engineer for a specific project, and we can have that discussion as well, but they are looking to procure an engineer for the authority, just as we are looking to procure engineer or engineers for our entity. And it says it in part 3 of the document. What do you want this consultant firm to do? They're going to perform the following services: public infrastructure design, planning studies, access agreements, construction administration, road HAP. They're hiring a professional service vendor, just like we have done multiple times in this township since I've been here, and they frankly are using the exact same process I'm laying out here. And the two vendors that we did acquire using this method were our labor law attorney and our benefits consultant. Story Point, that was another one, and it's laid out. And maybe I'll save this to when we actually talk about the issue at hand, which is the purchasing policy. This is a preliminary construction estimate, which if you look at the last document that I'm putting in front of you, it talks about the civil engineering procurement process and what I think the best practice should be. And also note that not a lot of other municipalities have this kind of detail in a process and procedure for how to deal with this, but I think it's necessary here due to the level of discord and the position that we're at in our township. So I thought it was necessary to lay this out. It's laid out in that request for the process I put together on heavy civil construction process, and that is laid out under the planning stage. So this is the very first step that any good municipality should do. You have a project in concept. Come to the board. What's the project for? What's the estimated cost? And it is just an estimated cost at this point. It's actually an estimated cost almost all the way through the project because of the things I pointed to earlier, the differing site condition clause and whatnot. I will leave that for now just because I wanted to comment on those specific items, and we have not got to the in and outs of the purchasing policy. I will refer back to that because those were the only issues that I felt like I needed to immediately address. I'm going to go now to Clerk Berry because she was pointed out as well.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Well, this sure is a lot of stuff, and I've seen a lot of it before, and I would have it would be great if the trustees had this also in advance to digest, because although I've seen a lot of it, I'm not sure that they have, so it might take them a little while to get through it. But what's encouraging is that the proposal that we have in front of us tonight, the purchasing policy adjustments and amendments, although not complete and not perfect, address many of these concerns. And in fact, many of the principles and the elements that were in the second draft that Treasurer LaFata had prepared a year and a half or so ago are here. So I think that is evidence of the fact that this was actually reviewed quite thoroughly, and many of those elements were in fact incorporated. So that's encouraging to see as well. So I'd encourage the other members of the board to note that as well. As you are reviewing all of this material, you'll see that much of what the supervisor has proposed here, first off, addresses many of the concerns that were brought up, and secondly, it does incorporate a lot of those elements, and I think that those are all good government things. Specifically with regards to, I know he's talked about specifically about our cell phone provider as well as our copier proposal. Again, those were needs that were brought to our attention that our staff had. Now, with specifically related to the cell phones and why we now have them, that's a matter of best practices for a number of reasons, and the board agreed, which is why they also, many of them have those. I think all of us have those township provided phones now. It's a matter of FOIA, and it's a matter of or FOIA accessibility, as well as a matter of best practices as is promoted by our professional organizations. So now the accounting end of it and the invoicing end of it, I'd be more than happy to sit down. Of course, this isn't the venue for that, but certainly go through that if there's any additional questions. But the copier contracts, again, that's a need that we have here. It's brought to us, was brought to our attention. That was a need that we needed to address, and we did that. And in fact, followed much of the policy prescriptions and procedures that are outlined here. I remember several years ago, Trustee Anderson and I were on a qualification-based selection committee for township liability insurance. And we didn't have any procedures or policies set forth for that. We knew that we needed to look at that contract. We did that, but we basically had to make it up as we went along. We had to find out what the best practices were, and we adopted a system that worked out very, very well for us. That was much of what you see here in the attachment A. And as a result, not only did we actually ended up staying with our current vendor, but we realized a $50,000 savings as well. So it's all about the process. I know when I first got here, there was no process for any of this, which was certainly not one that was codified in any kind of procedures manual or policy manual. And I'm very happy to see that we now have that in front of us here today to take to review, because I think that that's something we need to have. It's very important that we have processes and procedures in place so that when we're assessing things, we can do it uniformly, we can do it according to best practices, and we can do it in a way that will benefit everyone in the township, our taxpayers, our staff, and all the individuals and entities that request and require information from us. So I'd like to say I'm very happy to see this come forward to the board, because right now we have, in some cases, very much nothing codified, and this is an opportunity to have that, and at least it's a start. Again, does not address everything, but I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. I'm very excited to have it. I think it's a very positive thing, and I don't see anything in this proposal that's been put in front of the board for consideration that isn't at odds at all with anything that's been presented by Treasurer LaFata. In fact, I think what was presented actually punctuates why this is needed and necessary. And I will be very happy to have something like this in place, so that when these issues come up, and they come up all the time, that everyone has a resource that we can refer back to.
Bring it up to the Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. Well, I had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Echevetti during the past week here and go over some of this and about this Attachment A professional service contracts qualification-based selection. I commend you on this, just what the discussion has been tonight about codifying things, how the bid process should go as far as getting our vendors a protocol that sounds very honest, very ethical, sets up parameters of how the township should go about seeking vendors for a specific thing, multiple numbers of them, do the business of the township a review process, and eventually come into the board with a recommendation on what vendor should be employed. Also recommends every 3 to 5 years there should be reviews of these vendors. Ms. Berry talked about that. The insurance carrier, I believe, was in place since 1982, and that was about 2013 or so that we finally were able to get the old board, or the old whatever you want to call it, to allow us to take a look at it, and it resulted in a $50,000 refund from the company that was doing business with the township for almost 30 years. So it's tremendously positive, protecting your money to do these things. And again, I think this is a tremendous instrument within itself to continue. Some of the issues I'm going to talk about, though, Trustee Echevetti talked about we've been doing business with some people for 20 years, never took a second look. Just goes on and on. A new board comes in, same old business, same old people. Great job for the vendor. The township presence bid policy that is in effect up to tonight was enacted in May of 2015. Stated the board approval would be required for all expenditures over $3,000. Department heads would have, and whatever, would have to come to the board at anything over $3,000. Would not permit this $2,900 three times, you have $10,000 to try to get around the process. There was also a specific list of exemptions to this threshold. I'm not going to cite them all because I was getting late, but there were some items doing business on a daily or weekly basis that were exempt, that did not need board approval, and they were articulated specifically in that policy. The Sewer and Water Commission did a tremendous job. We have some members here over the last couple years taking a look at everything, and there were some serious issues about runaway expenditures that went over this amount that appeared in those documents and those bills. As a result, on or about April of 2017, this board, by a 4-3 vote, voted to remove contractual and, or shall I say, to include remove contractual and professional services from that list. It's just been arbitrarily assigned to that. Moving forward, they would be required, or shall I say, they would require all contractual engineering services that cost over $3,000 per project to be present to the township board for approval. Thus, the contractual and professional services such as engineering would be restricted from the practice of open-ended, unscheduled, and added-on expenditures billed to the township's financial coffers. Now, the issue I have with the big picture here, if you look at the proposed purchasing policy that we're addressing tonight, page 3, it goes down a list of what's excluded from perusal of board action, board perusal. What it adds, and I didn't talk about the other amendment B, attachment B, what it adds to it, anything that goes through the vetting process that I described earlier will be exempt from board perusal. I have an issue with that because now we have a Netherlands, and I understand there might be an engineering issue that runs over costs, and that should be addressed as such. But there might be issues in other vendors that are running over the $3,000 threshold, and if you read this, the best I get out of it is when it gets to $20,000, somebody's gonna come and tell the board about it. What happens between $3,000 and $20,000? And we're not just talking about engineering consulting. Maybe we're contracting with cleaners or cooks for the township, I don't know. And at what point are you gonna let this board know when someone's gonna come forward, a department head or whatever, and say, hey, guess what, folks, we're breaking the bank. And it's not my money or our money up here, it's your money indirectly. You pay your taxes, you don't have any choice in that. Your house is worth so much, here you go. Anyhow, I'm gonna stop right there. I could go on a while, I'll keep quiet, I'm sure I'm interested in the other discussion of this item tonight. I'm kind of interested that Mr. Joseph's not here and the board elected to move without him. But then again, I would recommend a no vote, and I thank you, Mr. Akabidi.
Thank you. Any further comments from the board, from individuals who haven't spoke?
The only thing I'd like to say is during Mr. LaFata's presentation, he said something about bids. Well, just let alone tonight, we had bids on 2 different things. We went out, we had 3 bids on fire truck and vest for repairs. You know, what I was getting back was that we weren't going out for bids, where I think we have gone out for bids on several things. The other issue was there's a lot here to do with our engineering firm. I know recently, sometime last year, there was a difference of opinion with members of this board with a certain one of the engineers. That engineer is no longer representing Chesterfield, and another engineer. It's the same firm, but a different engineer. So there has been changes done on that. That's all I want to say.
Trustee Vosberg? Treasurer LaFata?
On the traffic control, when I authorize a invoice for payment, I should be made available timesheets that can justify that payment. Doesn't matter whether it's a quantity of one or not. It should still be justifiable, whether it was an outside contractor or Deutsch themselves. That's a fact. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. I'm authorizing to spend the residents' money. The other thing about an estimate is just a preliminary estimate. And I'll give you an example of what a preliminary estimate does for the residents of Chesterfield Township. 15-mile sinkhole project was given an estimate by AEW. They took that estimate and they bonded billions of dollars based on that estimate. When the job was complete, Candace Miller drove a Mustang down the middle of 15 Mile, bragging about how much she saved based on the estimate. Well, the problem is the bond was made based on the estimate. If the estimate isn't accurate, what happens is the bond's made higher on an inaccurate estimate by our contractual services. They're not responsible, but the residents are paying our bond share based on an estimate, and there's been no adjustment to that. But currently, residents of Chesterfield on their sewer bill are paying for more than they should. There has been no adjustment. It's been a while. The best practice that Cliff Berry talked about, I guess it's supposed to be an excuse for almost a $5,500 overbill on our cell phones. Now, purchasing services aren't on your township annual budgets. If you go to page 14 on the plant and man audits for 2014 and 2015, you'll see an item in there called personal services. That's where it hits. Now, for 2014, you had $469,000. 2015, you had $864,000. It's not very transparent. And if it doesn't come to the board for approval, it gets buried in the plan and audit because you don't see it on the annual budget. Not very transparent. Now, I know what Supervisor Akretti has said, and it's kind of moving forward. Everything that I put in there, he's kind of inching towards it, but I can accept all that, but take out the exemption for engineering services for the 3,000 and the 20,000 delta. It doesn't make any difference. We've been in that process now since April. It hasn't shut down the water department. It hasn't flooded our basement. We've done the sewer replacement. It's not hindering anything. But what it does is controls the spending of the residents' money. You take that away and it's not transparent anymore because you don't see anybody coming to the board for a $3,000 expenditure approval, and they don't have to get approval or go out for competitive bid for anything over $20,000. They just get awarded it. And if that was taken out of the policy, purchasing policy, and amended to remove the exemption, I could live with it. Thank you.
I'll be up with you in 1 minute. Couple things there. The traffic control keeps coming up again, and I just don't, maybe I'm not explaining this correctly. There's a contract that we signed with unit prices in it. That contract is what gets paid. Now, if the contract says we can require the contractor to give us timesheets, then that's what we can do. This is one that, this shows really what has happened the last year. We're finally getting to the heart of the issue, and it's consulting engineering, and it's how municipalities and what the relationship with consulting engineers look like. That is what is holding this township back and dividing this board, and it has been for the last year. The phone bills keep getting brought up. It's very, very important for elected officials to participate together in the process. When you know that a phone bill, just like the ones we have at our homes or our small businesses, you're working with AT&T in our instance. There are credits that we have emails on that are coming through. We have 55 phones, 7 tablets, and another 11 tablets in the field. Our phone bill is going to average about $3,600 a month. Now, could that process, if this process was in place, what we would have is a team. So when a contract comes up like the copiers, it solves all those problems. I would like to go through the process here real quick, and because we are taking a tremendous amount of time on this, and we are getting to the heart of the issue, and it's construction engineering, and it's if they should be a partner, or if engineers should quote every job as they come. Now, the problem I have with this, and I have expressed this to many members individually, and many of you at this board, I am not comfortable bringing our community down that path. And the reason why is heavy civil construction, underground construction, road, bridge, and sewer is a very unique, and it is extremely risky for a community if they do the wrong thing. If you hire the wrong consultant, you can get into a lot of trouble as a community very, very quickly. That is why a qualifications-based selection process is so important, just like we use for the other folks that are listed as exemptions on that list. They are attorneys. They are folks that you do not represent the greatest value with the lowest cost. The greatest value comes with the right fit, the right structure, the right experience, the right fit for your community. That's what this qualification-based selection process does. And it doesn't only do it for contract engineering, which we're finally getting to the issue here, and it's contract engineering. It isn't how we procure purchasing policy. This addresses it all. This addresses the cell phone bill. What I'm envisioning as I run through this process. Now, I have 6 items total. I started this by the problem and the goal that I'm looking to solve at the very beginning, which I asked to be printed in the record. Trustee Anderson laid out very well the adding back in the exemption for professional service contracts approved by this board. That is what's getting added in. On top of that, I'm adding in a qualification-based selection process that puts together 3 members of this, the 3 full-time members, to be involved with every service contract that haven't been looked at in a long, long time. They analyze them. They have time frames. They have scopes. They have so the phone bill suddenly isn't getting handled by the clerk's office because it's an emergency. It's getting handled by the clerk's office, the supervisor's office, and someone from the treasurer's office. The difference is participation. Everything that I put here in front of, that I've presented to the board, they've had for weeks or months. The pile here, which I appreciate, I've had sporadically, but I didn't know that was coming, and just a little bit of respect back and forth. The phone bill, come knock on the door. The credits are there. It's very, very simple. There's nothing there. The copiers, yes, we need, just like everything else, every service consultant needs to be looked at. And are they the right vendor, and are we getting the right service? And I just would welcome participation, frankly, at any level. And so I am actually very happy that this is going on because I feel like we're participating. I've got some back and forth. The policy itself, we've gotten away from. The policy change we ran through with adding an exemption for professional service consultants. Those are partners of ours. Every one of those will have a legal contract associated with them, with termination clauses. I have also included a QBS process that I think will be shown as a best practice that other municipalities will look to in envy, frankly. I've also included processes for heavy civil construction procurement. 2 other documents I have up here and are available to the board are internal documents that I have put together. One is the actual request for quotations for engineering services. So it is a draft of the actual RFQ for engineering services. I anticipate, if this passes, starting there. As much as it's tore this board apart, we'll have a township engineer on board reasonably soon. And you'll see in the RFQ that each and every one of you have, my intent is written down very clearly. Engineer or engineers. Maybe the right decision, the right partnership for us is 3 firms. Maybe it's 4, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 1. Who's the right pick? The process is laid out here very quick, and it's a 4-step process. A team writes an RFQ. I have a draft here. The team reviews, re-reviews, looks at it. That RFQ goes out for quotes. We get qualification packets with size of firm, capabilities, financial status, the whole smash. We shortlist it as a team. We interview and get presentations from the vendors. We as a team decide this vendor is a fit, this vendor is not. We bring it to the board and the board chooses which vendor they would like to see. That's essentially the qualification-based selection process. That should be used for everyone. And I also ran down the heavy civil engineering process. The last attachment that I do have is an internal sample contract that we will have with our professional service consultants available for everybody's review. I will go back to Treasurer LaFata one more time.
I don't understand one more time, but basically, I don't understand why we would not qualify at least three sources of contractual engineering before we remove or exempt our current township contractual engineers and open up the floodgate. If we qualified 3 contractual engineering sources, which you say could be a risk of not having the right one first, and then remove the exemption for the 3,000 and 20,000, I could understand it. But you're kind of putting the horse behind the carriage, not in front of it, because what we're going to do is we're going to open the floodgates without any control. But you qualify your contractual engineering sources first, then you remove the exemption. Second is the cell phone. We discounted what was going on with the cell phone, saying that it's going to be an average of $3,600. It went up from $2,400. That's an impact on the budgets for every department in this township. Not
done? Okay.
Not done. The thing about the traffic control is still the issue. If you can't get evidence that it's done, you don't pay the bill. When somebody charges you for something that's not done in the private sector, it's a form of fraud. And I'm not going to sign anything for the township and spend their money that I can't get proof that we receive those goods and services. Thank you.
I think we've went around and round and round on this enough. Treasurer or Trustee Demink?
You know, this has gone round and round, and I have something I'd like to add to this. I'd like to amend your motion with consideration of the Charter Township purchasing policy and procedures, and change the attachment as follows. It said, the current language says the Chesterfield Township QBS team will consist of the township supervisor, clerk, and treasurer, along with departmental heads as determined by the supervisor. What I would like to see, because there's 4 trustees up here, is that Chesterfield Township QBS teams will consist of 3 members of the Township Board of Trustees, along with the department heads as determined by the Township Supervisor. That way we become a part of this too.
Support that.
Amended motion by Trustee Demink and support by Trustee Bosberg to, you will have to get the official, do you have the official wording, if you don't mind passing it down?
Just a point of procedure, Mr. Supervisor. There's a motion on the floor by yourself, seconded by me, to approve it as stated. So there can't be, the only person who can amend that motion would be you. So
Okay.
you could certainly amend the motion to include the changes that the trustees have indicated support for, but they can't amend that motion.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve the attached April 16th, 2000 board consideration copy of the Charter Township of Chesterfield purchasing and procedures with the following amendment. Change attachment A, page 2, under qualification-based selection team to read as follows. Chesterfield Township QBS team will consist of 3 members of the Township Board of Trustees, along with department heads as determined by the Township Supervisor.
Continued support.
Revised motion by Supervisor Akavetti, continued support by Clerk Berry. I'm going to now move up to the public, and then we'll come back.
I'm not done yet.
Go ahead.
I'm
Treasurer
not done.
LaFata, I will give you some leeway and let you go again.
There's nothing in the board rules that can't say I can't talk multiple times.
I was just trying to give our...
I would like to make a motion to amend the purchasing policy that until we qualify 3 different contractual engineering sources, we remove the exemption from the current policy. I would hope to get some support.
We have a motion on the floor that needs to be either amended by the motion maker or a vote taken on the motion on the floor. Move to the public. We have a motion on the floor, and we cannot take other motions at this time.
So after that motion, we can take another one.
Besides the one, if it's on the agenda, besides the one
Well, I'm assuming after this
listed
motion,
in our board of...
after this motion for the amendment, I'll motion for another.
You have the board rules just like the rest of us. We're going to move to the public.
We still on the same subject?
We got a room full still. This is interesting.
When I read your proposal, I looked through pretty much everything and basically tried to look at it from our experiences to what we experienced when we were on the water rate board. And some of the things we saw that I thought needed changing them, the first one was kind of just a general, why is there a $3,000 limit? Why is it so high? Does every department need that? Or, you know, if you look at some of the line items in the budget, like in the water department, I think there's one line item, I don't remember what it is, but it's $1 million. He could write $3,000 of orders day in and day out for the whole year. So I think somebody's got to take hold of that and look at, say, you know, is this the right thing? That's just a minor thing. The other thing is on the tracking. Do you have a computer program that these things are initialized on, and then it goes from department to department for authorization and to be banned before it's sent out and approved, so that you know the money's being spent and where it's coming from? And some of these says there's subsets in some of these line items, so they can be billed accordingly. This came out basically from your first proposal when you wanted to expand the northeast or northwest section of the township. And you went through it, and, you know, it's a good proposal, but the problem I had with it is where's the money coming from? And most projects and project details will say, here's my cost, here's my reasoning, here's what we're going to get out of it, and here's how it's going to get paid for. And that project did not say how it was going to get paid for, other than the fact that there's $10 or $11 million in the enterprise fund. Okay, there's $10 million there, but what does that do to the fund in response, in relation to the other things that that fund is supposed to pay for? We expect that there's going to be repairs done, replacement, and everything else, and that's why I'm saying it should be looked at. The enterprise fund should be each year proportioned off so that you know how much is there. You got to save for bond payment, how much you expect to use for replacement, how much you're going to pay for the water and the sewer, and what your income is going to be, so that you know what is going to come out of that enterprise fund, and you just don't dip into it and say, I'm going to spend $4 million and not know how it's going to get replaced. The only way it's going to get replaced is going to have to raise the water rates. You don't do business like that. You ought to do business saying, this is how it's going to get paid for, and I'm going to handle it. Or you could say I'm paying for it out of the general fund. That's where my problem came from, that, and that's what I think you've got to start looking at on these budgets. The other thing, how is durable equipment identified when it comes in? Whether it's expense or whatever, and how do you track it once it's here? The other thing is about a conflict of interest. You should sign statements. Everybody should sign and say, when I doing business with somebody, I will have no personal gain from doing that. And limit the amount of gifts and anything else, lunches, that is available to them from the vendors. Common sense. You know, look what's happened in Washington. Basically because of vendors or lobbyists can contribute to PACs and everything else now. You want to limit that. The contractual services I had a problem with too. And essentially it's because what we ran into with AEW when we were on the water board. It came out that there was tons of money being spent by the township for them, and there wasn't any real tracking of it and finding out what you got in return for it. They said at the end of the year when the audit was done, they said, oh, you know, we spent $500,000 this year, $500,000 last year, but nobody ever came back and said, by buying all of these services, here's what we gained. That's why, essentially, if you're going to get contractual services, basically do it for 3 people or 3 different firms. so that each time you're going out at a big construction process, you have 3 different police, so that you don't lock into one organization. Your other one, on the planning stage you had on your process, I again reiterated the funding. How it's recouped, is it on, what effect does it have on the enterprise fund? Or any other requirements that are in that fund? You don't want to be going down the road doing projects blindly and finding out somewhere else down the road that all of a sudden we're bankrupt in that area. Construction stage, basically, why don't we just have the civil engineer or whoever we're hiring do most of it? He could act as a project manager. That's the problem with, like Paul was saying, we're getting charged for things that didn't happen. But if you had a project manager, as these things go on, those changes could be made to that program as it's going through, whether there's a contract or not. I'm sure that if they ran into a problem up there with construction, with underground problems, and that they'd be back saying, we can't do this job for this money. They'd be looking for to get more money to do it. So at the same time, if there's doing something, if they're not doing something that you've contracted it for, that money should be given back too. Basically what I've got to say. So my consideration is get three engineering contractors for the jobs you want to do. Each different one. You're not going to do that many. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kadich. Any further public comment?
Well, this has been fun. I'll try and be very succulent so we can get out of here sometime reasonable tonight. First, I'd like to thank the board for hiring an in-house engineer. We struggled with that for a long time, and we have one. And I hope you put him to good use right away, because it looks like we're going to need him. The one thing I noticed about the purchasing policy is that it leans very heavy into construction. Okay, and I'm just wondering, the contract we currently have with AEW for 30 years is now null and void, since we have our own in-house. But back to the policy, I read through it, and I think it was pretty well thought out. I agree that you definitely have to qualify your vendors. I mean, that's business 101, working with the right people. Now, I've heard different ways you can do it. There was a technique we used where we called the Fast Five. There were 5 vendors that would go through periodically, your 3 to 5 year period, see who was good, who was not as well as they had been, rotate them around, and we had a core group, kind of like a go-to team that we could pick based on maybe their expertise, their breadth of knowledge, whatever. But you had people that you knew that could do their job. The thing we did that may be a little bit different from what you are all thinking is that, one, they weren't necessarily guaranteed that they would get a contract because other people still had the right to bid. And they still had a bid among themselves for a contract. You just didn't walk in and say, okay, today's Tuesday, you're the next contractor on deck. No. We got a project, which one of you 5 want to bid on it? Nobody got a free pass. Now, the thing that I have the problem with, and several people have mentioned this, is the reestablishment of the exemptions for contracted services, especially engineering services, based on services rendered through professional service vendors or service contracts, specifically with the qualification-based selection process and heavy civil construction procurement policy, which goes directly into engineering services, unless I'm mistaken. The problem with having those exempted is that things that aren't looked at get missed. Trustee Anderson said, you got a 17,000 gap there. That money is easy money, free money. Nobody's looking at it until it gets up to 20,000. A lot can be done under that window. And the reason I bring it up, because past experience has taught me there's 2 things that can happen with a contract. One is called contract creep. You get going in a project and side issues emerge. That's normal. Anybody who's worked on contracts knows this. It's real easy to say, well, XYZ is involved in that right now. Let them have a shot at it. Boom, you cut a check. That's rubber stamping. It lacks transparency. And quite frankly, because I have a suspicious nature, I look at human nature and easy money. Now, this is an honest board, but you don't have to look back too far to have somebody was sitting up here that wasn't so honest. Now, as you need to be good stewards of the people's money, you need to protect the township and your future board from less than honorable individuals. These exemptions could be used as a loophole for somebody so inclined. So, I like the intent of the policy, but I have to go with Trustee Anderson and some others. If you decide to vote it in tonight, I would like someone to make a motion to strike the exemption for contracted services. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Back up to the board. We do have an amended motion on the table to approve the attached April 16th board consideration copy of the Charter Township Purchasing Policy and Procedures with the following amendment. Chesterfield Township QBS team will consist of 3 members of the Township Board of Trustees along with department heads as determined by the Township Supervisor. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Supervisor Riccavetti.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Oh.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
No.
Motion passes. 8E.
Just approve the amendment, then approve the motion.
Okay, so now we have a motion to, I'll make a motion to approve.
It's already, yeah.
Okay.
No, I still have, I asked for the,
You can speak to the final motion. Speak again. Speak however long you want.
I will. I feel very confident. Based on what the residents just contributed to it, I would like to amend the purchasing policy to remove the exemption for contractual engineering for the $3,000 and $20,000 levels until we qualify, at least until we qualify 3 contractual engineering sources. Before then, we're going to be doing the same thing we've been doing for the last 20-some years. So I'd like to make a motion to amend the purchasing policy until we qualify at least 3 vendors for that position, that we remove your exemption.
Motion by Treasurer LaFata. Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Treasurer LaFata, support by Trustee Anderson to remove the exemption for professional service consultants from the policy. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
No.
Trustee Demink.
No.
Supervisor Riccavetti.
No.
Clerk Barry, no.
Clerk Barry, please call the roll on the original motion to approve the purchasing policy as amended.
Supervisor Riccavetti.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye. Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
No.
Trustee Anderson.
No.
Motion passes. 8E, approve a request by the Supervisor's Office to appoint Megan Burke, Human Resources Manager, as Acting Director of Human Resources, effective April 17th, 2018, until a permanent replacement is hired.
Support.
Motion by Supervisor Riccavetti, support by Trustee Anderson to approve the recommendation by the Supervisor's Office to appoint Megan Burke, Human Resources Manager, as Acting Director of Human Resources, effective April 17th, 2018, which is tomorrow, until a permanent replacement is hired. Comments? Treasurer LaFata.
The earlier proposal, there was a wage increase and a retroactive pay request. Those are no longer in that request?
10%.
Yes, there is a 10% pay request, but at the department head this morning, which your deputy was at, We as a township, it was a typo, we as a township cannot give retroactive pay.
I realize that.
So the date, it starts tomorrow. But there is a 10% bump in her pay for the increased duties that she will have.
And the dollar amount for that would be?
Her salary is approximately $76,000, so it's approximately $7,600 minus the applicable payroll taxes.
And in consideration,
And that would be on an annual basis, so we're anticipating that this position is posted to be closed here in the next, probably the end of this month, depending on the pool of applicants, which I have not seen, that whole pool. They will be analyzed by a team, just like they have been every other new hire that we've done. The team will consist of the three of us, and then we'll choose the right candidate and the right fit. So
Yeah.
that $7,600 is on an annual basis.
and the current responsibilities of benefit coordinator, which includes like MERS billings, will still be part of the responsibilities along with HR and everything else?
Right.
We're not taking any, I just want to know if we're going to transfer any of the current responsibilities somewhere.
This is actually good because this is one of the times where you and I actually have a conversation, Treasurer LaFata, and I enjoy that. We are short a man in our Human Resources Department, and Ms. Berg is going to be taking on every role possible until we get a permanent replacement there. So myself will backfill when necessary. Ms. Michelle Brandenburg, who is on that team, will backfill. We will do what it takes to run a Human Resources Department. And those conversations happen daily.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any further comments from the board? Motion by Supervisor Akavetti, support by Trustee Anderson to approve the recommendation by the Supervisor's Office to appoint Megan Burke, Human Resources Manager, as Acting Director of Human Resources effective April 17th, 2018, until a permanent replacement is hired. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Supervisor Akavetti.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item number 9 is addendum. There are no addendum. Item 10, public comment. Come up, if you come to the podium, state your name, your address, and keep your comments to 5 minutes, please. 5 minutes. Motion to recess till 9:15 p.m.
Support.
Motion by Supervisor Akavetti, support by Clerk Berry to recess to 9:15 p.m. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Supervisor Akavetti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
We are at recess until 9:15 p.m.
Playground.
Station. Back in open session at 9:15 p.m. Item number 10 are public comments. If you wish to address the board, state your name and address and limit your comments to 5 minutes.
Mr. Kadich, there is public comments.
Public comment. Name, address, limit your comments to 5 minutes.
Another break?
There's no paper here, but Joe Kadich, living on Sutton. I just want to say, essentially, the effort on Mr. Anderson, Mr. LaFata's part, and everybody in the audience that spoke, was basically to get away from the idea of having one individual, particularly on your heavy construction thing, that everything can go to them without obstruction. It should be that you should have 3 out there so that you can pick from each program that comes along, that you don't shuffle the paper and hand it to everybody. And I'm hoping if you do get this project engineer here, he'll be more involved in this. He can help that process. If you read my paper, there's a lot that he can handle. And my problem with AEW is our first contact with them was when they had a presentation, Lovelock had a presentation some time ago about how they were going to raise the water rates and what they were going to do with it. And it was basically, they put together a study, had 6 different options on there. They went through the options, and when it came time to ask, say, okay, I see what you're looking for. I think the one they picked was like 22% increase. And at the time, Detroit was raising our water rate 14%. And so they wanted to apply that to not the $1.05 or whatever else we were paying for water. They wanted to apply it to the $3.60 that the customers are paying. In other words, our water rate was probably go up 14 cents a thousand gallons. They wanted it up, what is it, 360, about 70 cents. So we started saying, okay, where's the background? Where's the need for this? Show us the base on this study. Nothing came out. Nothing could come back out and say what it was. Afterwards, we found out it was the wrong input. They did a lousy job on it. And that's what led to the formation and the request for the Water Rate Advisory Board, because AEW did that. Had they gone along with it, you know, basically the residents of this township would have paid a lot more for the water and sewer than they ended up paying. And yet it couldn't be justified when you start asking, where's your base rate? Where did this come from? And from then on, we found other things that everything just went through them. If they did a good job and came back with something that's substantial and you could rely on and say, this is great, I think it'd be okay. But I didn't find that to be the case, and we've not found it on any other instances since then. Basically, I don't know whether it should have come out before, but that's the problem when you lock into one group. If you have three groups and you're delivering everything and choosing between them, you get a better chance of getting a better deal and getting the right thing for the township. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cage. Any further comments from the public? Bring it up to the board. Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. I always get to go first. Appreciate that.
Nope, I can make it go.
No,
if you
that's all
want.
right. All right. I know we're talking about this policy tonight, and just two members, I think three members of the public, a member up here on the board, were on the Water and Sewer Commission as it did a lot of diligent work well over a year. And they did come up with information like one engineering company, I believe, was somewhere $400,000 a year for 3 years in a row. It seemed to be billing the township or whatever. And Mr. Cadish already talked about some of the issues in the presentations that were left a lot of questions among us. And the board policy was amended that engineering would have to adhere to that $3,000 ceiling too. And I know moving forward, you've got your purchase agreement. I do believe Mr. Accavetti, when it comes to the engineering, the actual crossing the T's and the I's and the amounts, that you are a diligent shepherd of that process. But tonight, when you go through the whole new purchasing policy, there's a potential of no longer being any bottom line there. The $3,000 figure is basically gone as new vendors come in. We went through the experience of the corruption that hit the township or the county's elected officials in the last couple of years. It even touched Chesterfield. My concern is down the road here, the way we do business, a new board or whatever, we may have inadvertently set something in effect that might boomerang back on the township and the tax base later on. Don't put your snow shovels away. Enjoy the nice weather we have here. And finally, I'd like you to keep Christine and David Joseph and their families in your prayers. Christine lost her mother earlier today, so thank you.
Trustee Domingue.
Okay, do you need any new sports equipment for upcoming summer activities? Head over to Dick's Sporting Goods of Chesterfield on Saturday, April 21st and receive 20% off throughout the store. Just tell the cashier you were there for the Chesterfield Youth Baseball Appreciation Day. The actual flyer can be found on our Facebook website, and you can show it on your mobile device to receive the discount. The Chesterfield Soccer Academy starts this weekend. There's still room for boys and girls aged 3 to 10 to get in on the action. Kids still receive soccer training, learn the fundamentals, develop skills, work in groups, and play small-sided scrimmages. They will finish these 5 weeks with foundation to move to the next level in this great sport. Courses take place on Sunday afternoons beginning April 22nd at Pollard Park. Hopefully it quits raining by then. You can register in person at the municipal offices. And help us spread the modness, Eat Mod Pizza at 50670 Gratiot, 23 in Gratiot, on May 16th between 11 and 8, and get 20% off your bill will be donated to Parks and Rec. Remember to bring the flyer on your phone. Also, we still have an opening in the Library Commission. No one has put their name in yet. We need someone, a member moved out of the township, so there is a vacancy on the Library Commission for the next 2.5 years. If you are interested, send your letter to Elizabeth Madden, our librarian over there. Also, just a quick public service announcement for DPW. With all this rain, everybody, I know it's backing up. If you do have a ditch in front of your house or a culvert, just if water's backing up, grab a rake, pull some of the debris out of there, sticks, leaves, or anything else. And help the water flow around here, because there's a lot of flooding and everything going on. Thank God we're not like down the southern part of Michigan right now. But just watch out for your neighbors and things like that. Thank you very much.
Trustee Vosberg.
Pass.
Treasurer LaFata.
I think tonight since I've listened to some of the residents, I think we've lost transparency when we don't bring the required 3,000 or 20,000 to the board, so the board members can see it and the residents can see it. Efficiency, it's not benchmarked. So we say something's a cost saving or an efficiency, and in reality, it's an overspend to what we're currently spending. And forward thinking, like Mr. Katie said, is incomplete for projects like the Northwest Quadrant. They don't take in consideration the funding, the timing of the project, or how and when, 5 years, 10 years, that money is going to be returned to the fund, and what's going to happen in the interim if there's a major repair. Thank you.
Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I'm very glad that we passed the purchasing policy amendments tonight. I think that goes a long way in filling a hole that had been there for a very long time, ever since I have been here. Certainly, we have some more work to do with that, and I think it is a work in progress, and I look forward to seeing future amendments to even better utilize that policy and encourage even better public policy in the future. Also, remember, please, we have an election coming up May 8th. You may still request an absentee ballot for that election up until the Saturday before the election at 2 p.m. That is to request it to be mailed to you. You may request an absentee ballot up until the day before the election. So if there is an emergency and you are going to be unavailable to vote here in the precinct, here in town, you can request an absentee ballot up to the day before the election. So should you need an absentee ballot, please make sure to contact the clerk's office. Lastly, we have a very exciting community enrichment program coming up on April the 30th, and that is the active shooter training that is going to be presented by our Chesterfield Township Police Department. And for those of us, I know active shooter situations are a concern for all of us, more so in recent days. And we are going to provide a program that will teach you what to do in those situations. What are the right things to do, the wrong things to do, the things to be aware of. That is a very valuable program that we are excited to bring to our residents. It is open to the entire public. Please check our website for more details on that program. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thoughts and prayers with Trustee Joseph, and I am cognizant of him not being here for this debate, and I'm also confident that we're going to be discussing this for quite some time, because we seem to be nowhere near on the same page with this issue. We're 100% unified as a board, and I anticipate we're going to continue talking about engineering, civil engineering projects, whether they're water, sewer, road, or bridge projects, or non-motorized paths, or drainage projects, and I look forward to that. With this action, I would expect, or I'm putting you all kind of on alert, I'm going to start assembling QBS teams, and I will be asking for input on a number of different vendors. One biggie that's coming up is our trash collection service that I brought, refuge contract that's coming up here pretty quick. So I'll be looking for a couple input on members. 3 members is all we can have to discuss as a group those RFQs and be involved with that process, followed by engineering. And I also will probably start assembling teams for each and every vendor that we have, seeing how we are so far behind. Treasurer LaFata brought up the phone bill and our cellular service vendor and our copying vendor, so that might be one that the Treasurer's office can participate in. The amendment, I think, was very warranted in that we have a lot of vendors that might not necessarily have the best skill set to assess. We have an amazingly talented board. In public safety, for example, maybe Trustee Anderson and Trustee Domink might be better served there, and also utilizing other members of this board. So I think we did a great service. I think looking forward, I think what you're going to see is this policy is we're going to have to revisit it and re-look at some other details like the thresholds and routing. But I think we're well on the way to this being a best practice policy for procuring professional service vendors. I'm very encouraged of the conversation I had here tonight in this dialogue. I'm still a little confused as to the intent and the issue of the opposition, frankly. Everything that was brought, this is what this policy is doing. 3 vendors was mentioned by a resident who came up. That's what this does. It allows us to have multiple vendors to choose from. Our current policy does not. This allows us to actually procure service vendors and not only engineering. And our current policy does not, because what you're not procuring a service vendor, you're procuring a civil engineer for a specific job. That we can do, and it should be done for very specialized projects. However, it does cost a lot of capital to bid projects, hard cost, and to put a engineering estimate in place. Hence, it leads to higher costs for our township. So I think we made a tremendous step in the right direction, and I do appreciate the board's support for passing this. And I look forward to, I assure you there'll be many, many more discussions on this topic in meetings to come. Item number 12 is a closed session. Discussions, 12A, discussion regarding strategy and negotiation of collective bargaining agreements pursuant to Section 8C of the Open Meetings Act. Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
Motion to go into closed session.
Motion by Clerk Berry, support by Trustee Vosper to go into closed session. And do I have a motion to go back into...
Motion to go back into open session.
Support.
Motion by Trustee Domink, support by Clerk Berry to go back into open session. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Domink.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Yep.
Treasurer LaFata.
Aye.
Supervisor Acovetti.
Aye. We're in closed session at 10:15 p.m. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Trustee
Support.
Domink, support by Trustee Anderson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.